Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. This is Annika Jackson with Your Brand Amplified, and I am here with a premier fashionista who has also been known as the voice of authority by New York Daily News, Angela George, live from New York. Angela, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm ecstatic to have you. I would love to hear all about your background in fashion, right? How did you start? Did you always know fashion was what you wanted to pursue? There's a lot for us to dig into about that before we get into what you're doing now. So I'm excited.
That's great. Yeah. Well, I had my first fashion fix at the age of 10. It was a pair of hot pants. They're called booty shorts today, but back in the day, they were hot pants. And when I was 16, I went to work at a denim store in my town. It was the designer denim craze of the 70s. So I was selling like Gloria Vanderbilt and Calvin Klein, and it was like the first designer denim craze. And that's what got me into, fashion. And I was brought to a trade show. I'm from New York. And I lived in a suburb of New York City, very close to New York City. And I was brought to a trade show on the weekends, to a couple of trade shows, in fact, to do the buying. And there was a little bit of a hiccup in between. I didn't go directly into fashion. I had some fits and starts trying other things. But at the age of 19, I did get a job in the city. And I started to commute into the city to work on the retail selling floor. And I started to go to FIT at night. So I guess, I knew that was trajectory, and I threw myself into it. I loved retail. I was in retail for 13 years started out on the selling floor, then became a manager, and then became a buyer. And that I loved. I loved being a buyer, and I did that for many years. And then from being a buyer, I always wanted to have a store, but to open a retail store, it's big expense, the rent, the merchandise, everything. I was young. I didn't have any money, but I always knew I wanted to have my own business. Ooh. So the way forward for me was to start a repping company or an agency, like a sales and marketing agency for brands. Because I had, as a buyer, I went to a lot of these showrooms and I saw that there was a business opportunity, and it didn't take as much money, and you could get draws against your commission. And there was just a way to kind of stabilize yourself as you're growing a business. So that's how I started a showroom times 2 showroom. I had that for 10 years, and I launched a lot of big brands out of my showroom in New York, later had a showroom in Los Angeles. And then from there in 1997, I started my own brand, Alice and Trixie, and I had that for 22 years. And I closed it in October 2019 as I was going to reboot the brand, rebrand and reboot the collection. And then COVID happened, and then I became an accidental author. So that kind of brings us up to today. That's the Reader's Digest version coming up to today.
You said you knew that you wanted to have a store. Did you always know that you wanted to have your own brand as a designer?
In the beginning, I didn't know that. I really didn't. I mean, I had launched other people's lines, and I had a lot of fun because I got to meet a lot of people. I got to work with the retail stores, and then I was doing the merchandising, which was like helping the brands, helping them to edit. And, I just had to walk in and be like, I like this. I don't like that. Make more of this. What about that? And then I kind of went on my merry way, and they had to be the elves in the back making all that happen and then deliver a collection that I could sell. So It was a pretty good business. It was a pretty good hustle, I'd say. But eventually, the reason why I started my own brand when I did was the more success that you have as a rep, the more that the brands do well. And then eventually they don't need to be in a showroom. They want to have their own showroom. They want to have their own brand experience and their own showroom. And they're like, thanks for the 3 years. You put us on the map. And now we're going to, we're partying. We're going to open our own showroom. And that's really what happened time and again. And that's when I would always feel like I would be nurturing these brands and growing them and getting them into the best stores. And then, so it wasn't sustainable. Like as an agent, as a rep, your job is to find the next thing. But what would happen a lot is the brands get jealous. If they feel you're not 100% focused on them, or you're always trying to find other lines. And for me, I was always kind of like a one-man kind of woman. Like, I would really focus in something, and I'd really want to help a brand. Like, I didn't want to be helping a million people. I wanted to be helping certain people. But again, to my detriment, they become so successful with my help. Obviously we all did it together. It was collaborative, but then they would open their own showroom. And then I was like, and I said, like, there used to be an Allstate commercial. It was like, there was a jingle, get a piece of the rock. It was like, get a piece of the rock. And I was like, I want a piece of the rock. Like, I don't want a brand that's going to leave me. I'm going to start my own brand. So that's really how it happened. It wasn't something that I was dreaming from. There's a lot of people that dream from a child, like, I want to be a fashion designer. And it really wasn't. It kind of ended up that way for me.
Amazing. Well, and let's go back to, so you had your showroom and you had it in New York, and then you opened another space in LA. So you had both of them running simultaneously. You kind of had to go back and forth a lot.
Yes.
I'm sure you had to make sure you had really good teams in each place. How hard was it to expand, knowing that people think about fashion perhaps a little differently in LA than they do in New York? Or maybe it's the same. I'm not in the fashion world, so but I'd love to hear a little bit about what it was like to run the business on both coasts and some of the positive and the negative about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for anybody that's going to have a business that's away from them, that where they can't check in on, and, they're going to have a team that they trust, and it's, a team that can fulfill the responsibilities and the obligations of running a showroom. So I think I was really lucky that, I was able to have good people. And the other thing was, there were a couple of the brands that I represented that were from Los Angeles as well. Okay. So it worked to my advantage, because I would have somebody from my team could go to the factories in Los Angeles and to see what was coming and what they were doing and what was, it drew us all closer together by having like one of my team where my brands were coming from. Yes, I mean, as far as different businesses, yeah, work ethic is different for sure. Ooh. LA, at least the times when I was, had my showroom and just the business in general, the people in LA don't have it's just a fact. They don't have the hustle like the New York people have. So there's definitely that a little bit of, there's that difference. I mean, it's real, so that's one thing. But if you have the right team and you're guiding them, they're understanding what's important to do and just the importance of things and being proactive and things like that. And then the other thing, I mean, definitely LA fashion is different from New York fashion for sure. And it's regional, like things that you're selling in New York could be different from what you're selling in LA, could be different from what you're selling in the Southeast or the Southwest or the Midwest. So there's a lot of regional differences. So, I mean, those are the only differences, I would say, essentially. But I think, look, if you're working on your business and not in your business, right? This is for anywhere. You're going to have teams. Like, you can't be, as an owner, as an entrepreneur, an owner of a company, a CEO, you can't be everywhere. So you need to be able to build the team that can work effectively in your absence.
Yeah, definitely. And then when you transitioned to your fashion brand, you knew that you wanted to have a piece of the rock, as you said. I'd love to hear about the name Alice and Trixie, and how did you decide what you were going to put out in the market? Was it based on what you love to wear? Was it based on holes in the market that you saw? What kind of research has to go into developing and creating your own line?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, the name first came from the Honeymooners. Alice and Trixie are the wives from the Honeymooners. And my sister actually came up with the name. We were brainstorming because at that time, it was 1997. I just felt like girls' names were kind of like a thing. Right. And I was like, I want two girls' names. And it was so funny. Like, Lucy and Ethel wasn't going to cut it from I Love Lucy. So Alice and Trixie, cute names. So that's how the name came about. And as far as the second question, knowing what to put out. Yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate because I had all the buyers already coming to my showroom. Mm-hmm. And this was before the internet. This was before, the only way to go direct to consumer back then was to open up a brick and mortar store. And good luck. That was how I went direct to consumer. There was no internet. So the only way to get to retail was either open your own store, start your own catalog, or sell to wholesale, so to sell to the stores. So it's, complete B2B business. And, for me, it did start out as, seeing some voids in the market, and then, but also working collaboratively. Like, for instance, my first big order came from Urban Outfitters. That, now they call Free People. It's Free and Urban and Free People, but it was called Urban Outfitters back then. There was no Free People. But anyway, there wasn't even Anthropologie back then. No, Anthropologie had just started, because that's the same company. And they had just started back in those days. And so, but I remember the buyer, Eileen, it was more about is there a void in the market, or can I fill a void for you? I didn't come into the market being like, I'm this prolific designer, I'm coming out with this amazing collection. And it wasn't like that. It was more about where did I see the white space and where was there opportunity that I could fill a need in the market. That's kind of how the brand was born. And I did go through, like the fabrics I started with were not fabrics I ended with, like we went from doing like printed, we did like the first order was like a short skirt, printed like rayon short skirts for Urban Outfitters. They bought a couple hundred pieces. Like that was one of the first orders. I did a private label order for Barney's New York, which doesn't exist anymore. Well, their brand exists, but they don't have the stores anymore. But, Barney's New York, I was doing like a knockoff of the Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress. Like that's what they wanted. They wanted wrap dresses in prints. So I got the fabric and I made the wrap dresses for them, and it was private label. So it was like a little bit of that before we really found the brand voice. I remember doing like stretch lace, believe it or not, like stretch lace cardigan and top for Anthropology. Ooh. So it was kind of more filling needs and little pockets of opportunity. But I'll say the brand really started to take shape when we hit on like before like Y2K, and that, in the first couple of years, we hit on these poplin shirts, like stretch poplin shirts. Ooh. That were very popular back then. These like shrunk in 3/4 sleeve shirts, and that hit like wildfire. So that became like, that was like the DNA of the brand was the poplin and the shirts. And then we started doing pants but it's interesting because that was where then, but then how the brand evolved over time, it became girly and print driven and dresses and tops, and we were designing all of our own prints. So that's what solidified in the latter years of the company. Many of the latter years of the company were around, that was the DNA of the brand, was design, custom design prints in bright colors, a lot of different color combinations and things like that. But it evolved. There was definitely an evolution, but I will say, yes, a lot of it was definitely, driven by the market, by the customer, by the needs of the customer. And that's how the evolution happened in the brand.
Yeah. I love that everything you're saying can apply really to anybody who is going into a business in an area or an industry that they love, because you loved it from an early age. You did a lot of different things. You went to fashion school, then you had your showroom, and then you saw, okay, wait, I want to do this now. But then you were able to find, as you said, those white spaces. And so I really love the way that you're talking about your brands and the evolution, because I think that's something we all face as entrepreneurs, is we might think we're starting in one place, but usually what you end up with looks a little bit different, right? You have to tweak it and pivot perhaps. And that kind of gets into your pivot to becoming an accidental author, right? With your book, Haute Pursuit. So I'd love to hear about that. You closed down Alex and Trixie. You were going to rebrand, open it back up. Pandemic happened. So share what happened next.
Yeah, thanks. It's interesting. Yeah. So that now we're in a pandemic and I'm home, and it was a little while into the pandemic, and there was a social audio app, Clubhouse, that came out. Clubhouse. In the beginning, it was invite only, and then they opened it up to everyone. And it was like the first social audio app that really took hold, and so many people were on it during the pandemic because we were all in lockdown. So you were literally like meeting, there were people on this social audio app, like you got in rooms, like there are these virtual rooms, and you would get in rooms with people you would never ever meet. You'd never have the opportunity to meet these people in real life. But they were all on this app. It was crazy. And so I was on this app, and I had a great time, and I was hosting rooms, and I was participating in rooms, and I started meeting people, and one person was writing a book, and I was like, wow, you're writing a book. I was like, God, he's writing a book. I'm like, God, if he could write a book, like maybe I could write a book. It was really I'm very competitive that way. So it was really just one of those things. And the other thing was, during that time, I met a lot of entrepreneurs on that app, and there were a lot of fashion people in the beginning. They ended up leaving over time, but when we were at heavy lockdown, like all the fashion people were there. So I got to meet and talk to so many people. And what I found was that so many people, like, they really didn't know what they were doing. And that's what I'm going to say. I feel like, the internet brought the good news and the bad news. It makes it really easy to start something, but it also makes it so easy that you could just start something without even thinking about it. Like, do you know what I'm saying? It's like, you could just, I could get a website. I could go, to a Shopify store, and I could just like throw this on there and like, wait for everyone to come, and I was meeting all these like young brands, and they were saying, I don't know how to drive traffic to my website. Like they didn't know about like search engine optimization. They didn't know about competitive landscape. They didn't know about, we're in this economy of the hustle and a side hustle. And I think it's great. Don't get me wrong. I think it's amazing. But what it has done is it's lowered the bar. So like anybody thinks they could do it and without really knowing how to do it. And so I guess to make it the point of what I'm saying is that, so I felt like a lot of these people needed guidance. And the book really started out as a how-to book, like how to start a fashion brand. That was the book. That was essentially what the book was going to be. And when I started the book, I started in with my story, and then I kind of took into this is how, I was really more going to be like the nuts and bolts and the foundation of how to start a brand. And a friend of mine read it, a marketer friend I met on Clubhouse as well. And he started reading an early draft and he said, I loved your story and I was so into it and I was so engaged. And then you started into this teaching moment. It's now it's Angela the professor, and I was so engaged in your story. I just I want to hear your story. I don't want to know how to do it, Angela. I want to know how you did it. And kind of back, and I ended up taking out a big portion of the book. I mean, a lot of the 2/3 of the book, literally. And I went back to the writing, and then I wrote my story. And within my story, within my journey, we just did the little Reader's Digest, but I talk about all the insights and, what I faced, things I went through. And it's almost like being a fly on the wall. You take you behind the scenes in a fashion brand. I take you behind the scenes of the photos. I take you behind the scenes of the design process. People don't talk about this. There's no book like this, so and that's what the book became. But I say accidental author because, a lot of people are like, okay, you wrote a book, now what? It's I'm like, I don't really know what, I wrote this book to do it. It was on my heart. The one other thing I'll say about the book is it really pays homage to the fashion industry in New York. Because I was in it in the 80s and the 90s and how everything moved to China and how we used to have a bustling garment district. And, we had a huge garment center that went for blocks and east and west and north and south, and how that, right around the .com, when .com happened and everything, now the showrooms are .com people were coming in and, little by little, I saw an industry dismantle over time. And I talk about that in the book. So I want, especially people anybody, but especially people that want to be in fashion, I think it's so important to know the history, and a lot of people who think they think about online and they think about influencers and Instagram and this, and it's it was another way before, but everything we do today is steeped in what we did before. We just have different means to do it. So you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So that's what the book conveys.
Amazing. Are you ready to take your brand to new heights? Join the Brand Amplifier for Entrepreneurs program. Learn how to build, elevate, and amplify your brand with a comprehensive 10-module course. Learn more about it and other ways to implement our strategies at fullcapacitymarketing.com. Click on EFCM Learning Hub for more information. Can't wait to help you amplify your brand. And when you started the journey of your book, did you talk to people? Did you talk to publishers? Did you decide to self-publish? What was that part of the journey like? And then how are you using it now? Are you doing speaking engagements? Are you holding workshops? Are you consulting for people who want to start brands and don't know where to get started?
So what I'm doing, as far as the publishing piece, I knew immediately. I didn't feel that, I think the publishers want a guarantee. They want you to either have been everyone knows you're an expert in this thing, or you have a huge social media following or something. I really didn't think that I would get a publishing deal. I didn't think I wanted to go that route to even try, because you're sending in these pitches and, trying to get it published. And then the publisher owns your intellectual property. And then they'll tell you, when to publish, when to release, the cover. I really wanted total control. I'll be honest with you. I didn't want to deal with that. I'm a designer. I know what I like and I know what's right. And I do know how to write. I did study writing before I actually went to FIT. And I enjoy writing, so I just felt like I felt like I wanted to be in the driver's seat. So that's why I didn't even try to go the publishing. For those reasons, I didn't try to go the publishing route. And as far as doing it myself, I had to learn. I literally, whether it was rooms on Clubhouse, there were a lot of rooms on Clubhouse. There's still today, there are these author rooms and they do like Q&A and things like that. So I was able to kind of like be a fly on the wall, hearing all these authors talking. I listened to podcasts. In those author rooms, if I heard about something they said about a platform or this or that, I was Googling and learning about draft to digital and it's like a whole ecosystem. Let's put it that way. I learned about the whole ecosystem of what had to happen. And then I studied books. I can't tell you how many times I went to Strand in New York. It's a phenomenal bookstore we have in New York. I would go back and forth for different reasons. I'm studying the cover. I'm studying the front matter, the back matter. I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know what front matter was or back matter. Like there are these lingo and terminology that I kept learning. And so I made my book. My book is designed and looks like it's like a Big Five published book because I studied how they look and what they have and, things like that. So, and I knew it was important to have an author platform. So we did my website. So I did a deep dive and studying about getting the book out there. And that's how it ended up, and then I indie published it. But I'll say that I created an imprint, Ludlow Press. Ludlow that's like a street in New York. And anyway, I created my own imprint. So I really made it look like the real deal.
Yeah.
And so that was that. And then as far as the speaking, this morning I was at Rutgers University. They have like a fashion program in the business school, and that was phenomenal. I was there. I spoke for like an hour and a half, and then there was a Q&A. So that was great. I'm just in the beginning of that journey. I've always been an entrepreneur and had my own company and my own business. So I never really had time to be speaking and doing other things. I am working on a TED Talk. It's called The Undeniable Power of One in Fashion. Ooh. It's about my thesis on something that I believe that, brands need to have. And then also, as far as consulting, like right now I'm consulting one brands, but I'm open to it, but I'm not actively looking for those gigs, but I would consult brands. And, like what's next for me? Workshops. I'm going to LA on Thursday and I'm meeting with actually one of my designers that I had her brand back in the 90s. We actually connected about doing a workshop, like a fashion workshop. So we're talking about that. And also I'm thinking about bringing a new brand to market as well. Something that I feel is this white space. Mm-hmm. I was talking about white space earlier today, where I see some opportunity. So I think I do want to say that, anybody who's thinking about any brands, whether it's a product or a service, it's like, look for the white space, like try not to be in the Me Too business, or if you're Me Too, you have to be Me Too, but this, or Me Too, but that. You can't just be Me Too.
You're a differentiator. Yeah. Well, I love
Correct.
that. This was a perfect segue because I was going to ask you what was coming next, if you were still going to relaunch Alice and Trixie, or if you were going to start something new. And knowing that you think about the white space, I'm like, is it going to be something for women my age? Or like, I guess I'm middle aged now, which is so weird to think about because I don't feel like it at all. But I feel like there's a lot of white space for us and fashion that really speaks to us. So you don't have to keep it away, but...
No, I do agree with you, though. I do agree. It's interesting. There used to be a store in New York. I think it was a plus size store. I'm not sure. It was called The Forgotten Woman. And I do think that there are a lot of forgotten women when you're getting into like 40s and, it's like the brands are either, contemporary and they fit like very narrow fits, like the stores I used to sell to, I have to be honest, a lot of them wouldn't even bypass like a size medium. They're like, our customers are really small. I'm talking about like this couple things. One is size, but then the other thing is age. Mm-hmm. But I think I agree with you that there is a lot of opportunity in that space to have things that are cool and relevant, but yet appropriate, but still have like an edge. Like it doesn't look like Trumpy or like grandma. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, sign me up. I want to be one of the first people to own whatever you're doing.
That's great.
Awesome. So the book, you've talked about like the opportunities it's opened up to you. Do you see other books in your future? Did that unleash like another level of creativity that you knew you had in you, but that you had not visited for a while?
Yeah, the writing for sure, because, it's funny. When I was looking for photos for the book, I went back because the book has a lot of photos in it. And when I went back, I found some of my old writing from when I was a lot younger that I completely forgot that I even did. Wow. And I was like, oh my God, I really did want to be a writer. And I did go to college. And what happened was I wanted to go away to school. And my mom, at the time, I was younger, I was doing drugs and this, that, and the other. And my mom was like, I'm not going to send you away to school so you could go party. She's like, if you could stay at community college for a year, I'll send you, then you can go away to school. So cut to, I'm a community school dropout. I didn't community college dropout. No, I went, but the classes I was taking were writing classes. So from the writing classes, and then I ended up dropping out and starting to work in the city. And then that's when I went to FIT. But I did always want to be a writer. So it was something that kind of brought that back. And as far as book 2, it's so funny. People say, what's the best way to sell a book? Write a second book, right? but I have to, but that's what they say. But I have to be honest. Book selling, it's not an easy business. If you have, I think for nonfiction, and you mentioned it, you said, are you doing consulting? Are you doing workshop? Are you doing a course? That to me, if you're doing a nonfiction book, it should lead into something that's more of a higher ticket for you versus, because you don't make money. So it's a very very thin margin on a book. So yeah. But again, I didn't write the book. Like I dove in and then realized the pool was deep, I didn't know what I was getting into. And I was like, oh my God, you really don't make money selling this book, but whatever. I didn't do it for the money. I really didn't. I mean, yes, I was going to write a follow-up book, and I still on that back of my mind to write that I wanted to write initially because my book pursued, which is my story, but then the book would be Haute Brand. So that would be the how-to book, how to start, the real nuts and bolts. But aside from that, with the writing, I think what I may do is I might just do some more blogging, and like for now, just really getting out like a newsletter and maybe doing something more around reporting and trends. And I missed that piece because as a designer, I was always scoping out what's happening. I was going to vintage. I mean, I was at a vintage show yesterday. I was like I said, I'm working with this one brand, but I was always going to vintage stores and shopping, going to Europe. And, as a designer, I was always being fueled creatively by these trips and traveling and shopping and things like that. And I do miss that. But then I was thinking with the blog or with a newsletter, I could bring those insights, but into a newsletter. This is what's hot, or this is what I see as fashion tips, things like that. So I'll be honest with you, I'm a work in progress. And like you said earlier, it's like sometimes, you get into something and you don't know where it's going to go. And it is important to have a goal. I think if you don't put a destination in the GPS, where are you going? You don't know where to go. But I think even with the destination and the GPS, you need to allow for, maybe I'm going to pull off to the side of the road and stop at this farm stand. You need to be able to, right? Right. So to kind of see where, and I'm kind of open to the possibilities.
Yeah. Well, I love that for you. And I feel like we're all still a work in progress all the time, constantly thinking about, reinventing, or for the people who do have 9-to-5 jobs in an office or in corporate, a lot of them also are looking for, well, what do I want to do next? Is this what I want to do for the rest of my career? Or do I want to take a leap and do something different? And so I think entrepreneurship is the dream, right? And you've been lucky to be able to do that for your career. And it sounds like you're still getting to do that. And you're going to be doing a lot of other new pursuits that still are in line with your values and your passion and your talents. So I love that. If somebody is looking at starting out as an entrepreneur, what are some things that you would advise them to do that you wish that you'd known when you were starting?
Okay. Don't be a control freak. That's one of my biggest things I'll say. Yeah, no, because looking back, I feel that I could have delegated more and given more reason. I did delegate a lot, but I didn't give free rein. My office was a bit of a revolving door. Mm-hmm. Everybody knew Angela had to put final stamp on things, which as a CEO you do. Right. But it was to a point where I think if you're not empowering your team to be able to make decisions, for instance, I have a friend, she has a great saying. She said, I want my people to be problem solvers, not problem spotters. And I love that. Yeah. Because anybody can spot a problem, but can you solve the problem? But I think that's leadership. That comes from the top down. You have to be able to empower your team to feel confident enough to make those decisions that maybe they don't ask you every single time for everything. So I think that that's really important, because I think what happens is there's a great book. and he's a mentor of mine, Michael E. Gerber. And this is for any entrepreneur. I love the E-Myth Revisited.
Yeah.
Is he has many E-Myth books, but the E-Myth Revisited I really like, because he really talks about this concept of working on your business and not in your business. And the thing is, if you're mired in the minutia of the day-to-day, you can't be the visionary for your business. If you're in the galley, like, in the machine room, you have to be, above board and looking for the iceberg. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that's a big thing, is to be able to hire for the things that you don't know how to do. Mm-hmm. That's really important, to be able to bring in team that's qualified. But there's a caveat to that. I do think it's important to try and understand things, try and at least like broad strokes. Like, okay, obviously, if you don't know how to do Facebook ads, you have to hire somebody to do them. Right. But at least try to have an understanding of how that works. And because I think sometimes what could be detrimental is when you really don't know a lot of things, people could take advantage of you.
Yeah.
And charge you more money for things because they know you don't know anything about it. Always be a lifelong learner, I guess, is my point. Be educating yourself. Like, I think that's important. And I think it's important, I feel like those 3 columns, it's like, know what you're good at, know where your passion lies and what you do amazing, and, zone in there. If there are things that you can do, but you're okay at it, you're not great, you're okay at it, you can do it, right? And then there are things that you just really don't know how to do. So I think it's so important to try and outsource like the 2 columns and try to stay where your passion is, and not get involved in the minutia of the day-to-day of the business. And because you want to be thinking about, is this a revenue generating activity? Like, what am I doing right now? Am I just like doing busy work? Like, is this moving the needle in my business, what I'm doing? Or can I outsource this to somebody? Because the other thing, you want to think about your time as well. Like, put the value on your time. Like, if it's going to take me 5 hours to do something at the rate that I should be earning, that would be X amount of dollars. But then if I could hire somebody to do it for a fraction of that or whatever, because it would be a lot less because you're the CEO, if I could hire someone, then that makes sense to make that investment. And trust, verify. That's another thing. Trust, but verify always, because if you just like kind of tell somebody to do something and they're just like left to their own devices and they don't really want to ask questions because they feel uncomfortable, and you're like, oh my God, you did this wrong. The leader. Like, I'll just give you an example. Like, we would have a lot of interns, right? Like all the time. And my team was responsible to manage those interns. And I would walk into the office and I would be like, I would see an intern doing something really bad, like, tagging a garment, like making a hole in something that they just obviously, they were like, here's a pricing gun, go do it. And somebody walked away and forgot about them. And then they're doing it wrong. And then I would get mad at the person who delegated it, because I'd say, you are setting this up for failure. Now this person feels bad. The owner of the company had to come in and see them doing this wrong because you didn't make sure they were doing it right. So I think it's important to, give somebody something to do, but always double check that they have an understanding and they're doing it accurately. I have like many, many ones, but those are just some that came off the top of my head.
Yeah, those are fantastic. Thank you for sharing those. Where is the best place for people to follow you, find you, learn more about what you're doing now and what's coming next?
I would say, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm having a lot of fun on TikTok. I'm over on TikTok under Haute Pursuit. Yeah. And Instagram, Haute Pursuit Book. And then my Instagram is Angela George. But those are pretty much, I do have a YouTube channel as well. So that's kind of somewhere around there is where you'll find me. But, so definitely my website and definitely LinkedIn for sure, if you want to connect with me. But yeah, and I'm always looking for more followers on my social media.
Fantastic. No, this has been really insightful, and I've loved our conversation and hearing about your journey. I'm looking forward to reading your book, and I'll also drop all of your links in the show notes so that people can find your website and know how to find you from there. So Angela, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it. I'm serious. I want to sign up for whatever you do next. I'm ready to sign up now for your new line whenever it comes out. So make sure to let us know, and I can update the show notes when that is ready as well.
That sounds great. I appreciate it. I appreciate you. Thanks for having me. And it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to my listeners for coming back for another amazing expert talking about her brand and how she developed all of the things that she's doing and putting goodness into the world, sharing some knowledge with you. I'll be back again in a few days with another amazing expert. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.